hope you guys enjoyed that little intro sequence there. Hi, my name is Ryan and welcome to another video. Today we have the new 10th generation iPad right here, and I must admit I had very high expectations for this one. At first glance, it's a complete redesign from last year's model that looks very similar to the iPad Air 5, but it does come with a handful of compromises that I certainly wasn't expecting. Right off the bat, a few of the headline changes include the new 10.9-inch screen design that comes with a much smaller bezel form factor, better camera featuring a landscape 12 megapixel ultra-wide front camera, the A14 Bionic Chip, and let's not forget Apple's new color options. We only have two storage options of 64GB starting from $449 for the Wi-Fi only model and 256GB starting from $599. Now these starting prices are only for the Wi-Fi only model, but annoyingly we don't have the 128GB model, which I think would be the sweet spot for many people. And if you go for the Wi-Fi and cellular option, then you're looking at paying $599 for 64GB storage or $749 for the 256GB storage. Although there's that bigger screen now, there's a price jump of $120. And funnily enough, last year's iPad is available at $329. And while I think the improvements Apple made to the 10th generation iPad are significant, I'm not sure if those of you looking for an inexpensive tablet will find these changes worth the cash. Looking at its design, it looks very clean with a very nice matte finish. Unlike last year's iPad, I think it is safe to say that this year's model has been completely redesigned. The home button is gone, Touch ID has moved to the lock button, the bezels are smaller, the display is bigger, the edges are squared off, and the front facing camera has been moved to the iPad's landscape edge. Now these are significant design changes, but I personally have seen these changes in the Air and Pro line, so it's not exactly a fresh look. I really like the design that Apple adopt with their products, which is always slim and light, making it a pleasure to use. Complementing this with a case to ensure it is well protected is vital. While Apple's Folio cases can be fairly expensive, I have personally always opted for third-party options. I would recommend opting for this case right here by G-Tech, which fits perfectly and ensures your device is well protected. And they have even included a pencil holder, which is always nice. Now on the inside of the iPad we have the A14 Bionic Chip, which was first seen in the iPhone 12 lineup. Since last year's model had the A13 Bionic Chip, it only made sense that Apple upgraded that department, even though the A13 chip was never slow to begin with. Of course, for Apple to justify their price jump, they are going to increase the performance. When using the iPad, it was able to handle everyday tasks when working on Safari, Word, Excel, Gmail and Notion. The tasks ran as smoothly as possible. I even tried playing Call of Duty at the highest settings, and as you can see, it's a very smooth experience. On the content creation side of things, I tried editing raw photos in Lightroom and they were exported very easily. Editing and exporting 4K videos on CapCut also went very smoothly. Of course, the A14 is not as powerful as the M1 chip on the iPad Air and M2 in the iPad Pro, but the vast majority of iPad buyers will be happy with its performance. However, there is one catch with the A14. This iPad can't use the new Stage Manager, multitasking and window management features that are in iPad OS 16, as they're limited to iPad Pro models from 2018 and later, or the M1 powered iPad Air. This would have been a really nice feature to have, especially for students. As for battery life, Apple continues to meet or exceed its 10-hour estimate it provides for every iPad. I was able to get just over 11 hours while carrying out everyday tasks and playing back movies on Netflix. Of course, more intensive tasks like gaming or editing videos will reduce that time significantly. Now, in comparison to last year's iPad, the screen here is definitely bigger. It currently has the same 10.9 inches as the iPad Air, and that extra screen real estate does make working with multiple apps feel a bit less cramped. But this display still lacks the subtle details you'll find on the Air. Specifically, the display isn't laminated to the front glass, it's missing an anti-reflective coating, and it doesn't support the P3 wide color gamut. Although the display is not that bad, using this iPad in daylight there is a lot of glare, but this issue can be resolved if you invest in an anti-glare screen protector, which obviously means more money is being spent. These features might be easier to ignore when it costs $329, but this new iPad only costs $150 less than the Air. That's not to say this display is bad, but it's clearly the worst in the iPad lineup. and its deficiencies are a lot more prominent at a higher price. I noticed the air gap between the screen and the cover glass less than I expected, but it was a lot more noticeable when I had the iPad in my hands. Apple also made some significant improvements to the camera system on the new iPad. It now has the same 12 megapixel back camera as the Air. It's not the best camera out there, as I always say, but then again it's not meant to be. But for anyone who wants to shoot video, it now offers 4K capture while last year's model maxed out at 1080p. More significant is the front facing camera. Oddly enough, it's exactly the same as last year's model, with one notable exception. Apple finally put the front facing camera on the landscape edge of the iPad, which means your face will actually be centered if you're taking a video call with the iPad in its Folio case. Amazingly, this iPad is the only one with this feature, which I guess makes it unique in a good way. Speaking of the keyboard, the new iPad has its own redesigned accessory here. The Magic Keyboard Folio is two separate pieces, a back that magnetically attaches and has a kickstand, and a keyboard that attaches to the side of the iPad. It then uses the smart connector located on the edge to sync and power the keyboard. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to test it out as I'm currently still waiting for my one to arrive, but once I get my hands on it, it will most likely be a student edition review. But I must address the elephant in the room, and it would have to be the cost of this keyboard that comes at $250. This means that the basic iPad with 64GB of storage and this Magic Keyboard Folio would cost $700. That's a wild amount of money, and you could get an iPad Air and a second generation Apple Pencil for just a little bit more, or pick up a solid Windows laptop if you're going to be doing a lot of typing. But I won't say more on this keyboard until I get it. My Apple Pencil also has not arrived due to high demand, so I'm still waiting for it to come through, so this will be a brief review. Initially, you may have probably noticed that Apple have set some boundaries to keep this iPad from infringing too much upon the Air and the Pro line. Nowhere is that more obvious than the fact that this tablet still uses the first generation Apple Pencil introduced way back in 2015. While the original Pencil is still a capable tool for drawing and note taking, it does have a number of issues. It has a built-in lightning connector on the back to charge it. You literally plug it into the lightning port on your iPad or use a dongle to connect it to a cable, which means extra money spent. It's a very awkward setup, compounded by the fact that you can easily lose the cap that covers the charging end of the pencil. It's also a perfect circle, which means it rolls away easily and there's nowhere to store the pencil on the iPad itself when you're not using it. All these problems persist, but now this iPad uses USB-C charging, which means there's no lightning port to plug the pencil in for charging. Instead, you have to attach the pencil to a new lightning to USB-C adapter, plug that mess into a USB-C cable, and then plug that into your iPad. I guess those of you that still own an original Apple Pencil can still use it, but the much improved second generation model would have been the better option. It has a flat edge that snaps magnetically onto the side of the iPad for charging and storage, solving all the problems I outlined. To sum up, the new iPad is an obvious improvement over its predecessor in a number of ways. By that measure, it's probably worth the extra cash Apple is asking for, since it comes with a bigger screen, better cameras, a more powerful chip, and a modern design. Considering this would be more of a budget-friendly iPad, it would have been really nice if Apple decreased their asking price and possibly included a headphone jack while ditching the expensive and confusing accessories. But putting it in context with the rest of Apple's iPad lineup, it actually makes it harder to sell. Now let me tell you why. Because if you have an older iPad, you'll need new accessories, and both the iPad and Keyboard Folio cost more than the older option. And Apple is still using the first gen pencil, which isn't bad if you already have one, but it's going to have to make that jump from the old one at some point, and this would have been a smart time to do so. Also, every other iPad Apple sells apart from last year's budget model uses this accessory now, making this an obvious case of upsell. The second generation pencil is just so much better, and I would recommend it to anyone who's interested in using the Apple Pencil to just buy the iPad Air instead. For $150 more, you get a powerful processor, a significantly better pencil experience, and a better screen. If you want the basic iPad experience and you don't want to spend too much money, last year's model is still easy to recommend. This iPad is more like a cheaper alternative to the iPad Air 5, and it's a common strategy for the company. In 2020, Apple took the iPad Pro design and put it in the iPad Air, and subsequently bumped the price. Now Apple is doing that again, taking the Air design, putting it in the base model, and making it more expensive. My hope is that within a year or two, Apple adds support for the 2nd generation pencil to this model and cuts the price below $400, as it would make this iPad easy to recommend. Note that the 9th gen iPad is still available at a far lower price, so for basic browsing, note taking and watching movies, it still manages to do the job, despite its design being much more dated by comparison. But to make that final decision, I would recommend popping into your nearby Apple store to actually try it out and see which one actually works for you and suits your everyday needs. I hope this video will help you guys make the right decision when it comes to choosing the right iPad. I will be doing a student edition review on this 10th gen iPad right here once I get all my accessories delivered, so stay tuned for that one. I've been Ryan and I will speak to you guys soon. Take care.